So last night I said we would speak about the Metta Sutta, but that's going to happen tomorrow because there's more to be said. Because I want to talk a little more about Metta and about the training in Metta and the purification of Metta. So I mentioned last night about Metta Bhavana being a concentration practice. And we think of this as cultivating Metta. We speak of this as cultivating Metta. But here language is really difficult, and that cultivating word is actually just a metaphor. Because we're actually not cultivating Metta. We're accessing it, as I said this morning. But even that language is not quite right. Because, as I also said this morning, Metta, and last night, Metta is relational. It's active. It involves flow, connection, movement. It's as much a verb as a noun. It's an active, benevolent regard of all beings. There's a beautiful line in the suttas. Some monks are speaking to the Buddha about how they live together, and they say, we look upon each other with kindly eyes. That's metta. So it's that care no matter what. And it's very active. So the root of metta is the same as mitra in Sanskrit, which means friendliness. And I really love that, because when we are friends with someone, we know their faults, but we're still friends with them. It's like, oh yeah, that's just the way they are. And this active friendliness manifests in so many different ways. Many of you are familiar with the way Sayadaw U Indika speaks of the spirit of metta. And I love this because it's an expression of how metta can manifest. So he says, for example, the spirit of metta is always cool, it never burns. The spirit of metta inclines to and notices the good, it never obsesses about faults. And I particularly love that last one because I habitually notice faults. That's just the conditioning that I have. So to access the freedom from that is quite something. And another aspect that he highlights is the spirit of metta is always independent. It never clings. So this picture of this active, friendly state, I don't even like that word state, but this active, friendly quality of heart and mind that we access when we connect with metta. It's powerful. And because it is so dynamic and has so many facets, please don't confuse it with an experience or a feeling. We come to the practice with ideas of what metta is, but it manifests in so many ways. And yes, it's open-hearted acceptance, really a radical acceptance. But there isn't always a tangible experience connected with that. There isn't always a tangible experience connected with that acceptance. Mm-hmm. So if you're sitting here repeating the phrase over and over, and it doesn't feel like much is happening, and the thought arises, it's not working, I'm not feeling anything, don't believe that thought. Because metta isn't the feeling, it isn't the whatever transient physical experience we have. It's much deeper than that. In the Abhidhamma, the Buddhist psychology, there's a list of almost 200 different mind states. And metta's not in there. Which when I first realized that, I thought, wait a minute. There's this thing we cultivate. How come it's not here as a mind state? But then you look closer and you see, there is dosa, no dosa. So there is a state in the Abhidhamma, a mind state listed there, as a complete absence of ill will of any sort. And that's metta. Metta is more characterized by what is absent than what it is. So, metta, in the suttas we've been chanting, or the sutta extracts we've been chanting, the Metta Sahagatena, the four boundless states. In that chant, 4 times each time, it's without hostility, without ill will. And in the Metta Sutta, I will speak about this, I promise. The Buddha keeps coming back to that. It's like he cycles around and keeps coming back to no hostility, no ill will. Even though in this sutta about metta, the word metta is only used once. But what's emphasized instead is no hostility, no ill will. In the Visuddhimagga, this text that describes this practice, it speaks of metta in terms of its opposites. So in terms of what it calls the near and far enemies of metta. So the near enemy is what, when we're learning languages, we call false friends. So these words in a foreign language that look identical to the word we use, but they mean something really different. And the near enemy is like that. And you may encounter it tomorrow. The near enemy is what the text calls sentimental attachment. Oh, I love that person so much. You know, that, the stuff of opera. The opera and, drama. It's so funny. I used to love opera, and what's coming to mind is a couple of arias, and I'll spare you. But this sentimental attachment, this attachment to people that we love, well, I don't even want to put that in quotes. The attachment to people that we love is attachment. It's not metta. And it's not boundless. It depends on conditions. So, for example, couple, they get together, they love each other, they get married. And, just very happy, everybody loves each other until somebody has an affair. And then that love turns into hatred, anger, jealousy, envy, whatever it is. It wasn't metta, it was the near enemy of metta. Metta doesn't change when somebody else does something stupid. Metta is that boundless, open-hearted acceptance and care, no matter what. So that's the near enemy. The far enemy is very distant from metta. It's the opposite. It is dosa. It is ill will, anger. And when Sayadaw U Indika says metta is always and forever cool, it never burns, he's referring to the absence. Remember, adosa, the absence of dosa, which is always cool. So in the Visuddhimagga, then it goes on to say, well, the metta practice succeeds when there's no trace of dosa left in the mind. And it fails when it spirals into sentimental attachment. Sayadaw U Indika likes to talk about metta erkan in Burmese. And he jokes, he says, well, now we only have a little electricity every day, so radiate metta because you don't need any electricity for that. And he says, air conditioning produces coolness. Metta also produces coolness. When we turn on the air conditioning, that coolness may not be immediately apparent. But when it's been on for some time, we begin to feel increasingly cooler and more comfortable. There's something in that worth mentioning. And that little phrase, after some time, we can't just flip on a switch and be suddenly cool. Because if you think about metta as adosa, a lack of dosa, you can imagine an incremental clearing out of the heart and mind. A little less dosa, a little less dosa, a little less, and gradually less and less and less dosa until it's gone. And it is a very chilled out experience when the metta is completely pure. There is actually very little there to feel. There is well-wishing, that's obvious, but it's very cool and peaceful. And it can even be a physical experience. There was a Burmese lady who was practicing metta at the monastery, and she was walking around in the hot season with a shawl because she was so chilled out from the metta, she was actually cold. I thought, ooh, I have work to do. So it can be very chilled out. There's no, none of that emotional tone. And when the heat of dosa is gone, we connect with this boundless well-wishing. It's actually, even though it's quite a still space, it's very powerful. It's like the rain that softly falls and soaks on everything.
È come una pioggia gentile che impregna ogni cosa, ammorbidendola.
But at first, no. At first, what we see are the barriers to that. So I want to speak to the process that we go through when we work with these, because I'm sure every single person in here, well, including me, has experienced dosa today. Everybody? Anybody? Yeah. These barriers, we meet them in the practice. So, working with these is a twofold process. First, we have to train the mind not to obsess about dosa, not to get lost there to the extent that we don't see anything else. You know, I have to say, this is one of the more beautiful places on the planet, especially in the springtime. I was doing walking meditation up that direction as far as I could go, and the Spanish broom was blooming. There were orchids. I mean, you could see the river in the. It was so beautiful. It was just, there was so much pleasant sense contact, and I chuckled to myself because I thought, you know, I can let this in today because I'm not obsessing about something I don't like. Sometimes in the practice, that's all we can see, and we don't even see the beauty around us. We can't see it. We're just with something else. So the training is inclining to metta instead. That's why we use that annoying phrase all the time, every moment without ceasing. I'm joking, but sometimes it is annoying. It's like, oh, the phrase is so boring. It's so, I think, sometimes, I have had this thought, it's so saccharine, it's too sweet, yuck. I went through a long process when I was first cultivating metta intensively of really hating it. I've gotten over that, obviously. But we have to train the mind that would prefer to obsess about what it doesn't like to go to metta instead. And we use this phrase, and we use the person for whom we're cultivating metta as basically as the means to do this. So this is where that metaphor of cultivation actually works. Because each phrase is like planting a seed. And we just keep going. We just keep planting one seed after another. So learning to incline to away from dosa is an incremental practice. And with the continuity of that repetitive inclination, it becomes easier and easier and easier to move away from dosa and to access what is natural when dosa is absent, which is metta. So I used a metaphor this morning of what we're actually cultivating in this practice is access to metta. But when we cultivate those seeds and they grow and become strong plants, so to speak, metta plants. When that cultivation or that inclination over and over and over again manifests as adosa, no dosa, then what we naturally feel, what we access, is pure metta. It's the story I told last night of anger turning into metta. No, I'll start all over again. So when we cultivate metta, and we continually incline away from dosa, then it's like the story I told last night. Anger, dosa, just vanishes. And what we naturally access, what naturally arises by itself spontaneously, is metta. It takes patience, it takes gentle perseverance to do this training of the heart. Because what we're doing is encouraging the mind to go in one direction and discouraging it from going in another direction. The Buddha invites us to take this up, put that down, to take up this habit of inclination and to put down that habit of inclination. And it takes a lot of energy, actually, to resist the pull of old habits. That mind state that I was describing of, I don't even like this metta, it's so sickeningly sweet. That's an addiction to dosa. Fortunately, we are intelligent beings. Because the more we do this as a practice and see the heat of dosa, the less eager we are to pick it up. Once we see burning as burning, it doesn't require any thought. We just don't want to go there anymore. And yes, sometimes there's delusion and we don't see dosa as burning. But it gets easier and easier to see that, fortunately, really fortunately. I have a very good friend in Burma who shares my conditioning about being, having a tendency to abide in dosa. And for quite a long time, we bonded over this in a particular way. Because it was guaranteed if something was bothering one of us in the monastery, there would be an eager ear to listen to that story of dosa. So one of us could easily go to the other and go, one of the nuns told me, and the other would go, oh, you're kidding. Oh, that's awful. And we'd start kind of getting each other all worked up about whatever it happened to be. And sometimes within a very short period of time, we'd both want to leave the monastery for good. I mean, we're out of here. This is a horrible place. But over the years, we've gotten so much better at not doing this because we both fortunately have a practice. And sometimes we just look at each other and go, yeah, I know. And that's as far as it goes. And one of the turning points was very funny because my friend Ayya and Mimi and I, we coexist very closely in Burma. And one day, Mimi and I were talking like this. And Ayya walks into the room, and one of us said, I can't remember who, did you hear about... But it wasn't said so mildly. It was like, oh... And she just looked at the two of us as she walked through the room into the other back room. She says, I don't want to talk about it. It was so deflating. It's like, it was like there was this silence. It's like, you don't? But in that silence, there was coolness. It was like, oh. Phew. That was just one example. Over the years, we have trained ourselves and each other to just go, oh yeah, we don't want to go there. The dosa still arises, but we don't get hooked in the same way because of the metta practice. It's really quite amazing, actually, because the world, the monastery, it's the same place. it's not suddenly populated by, arahants, but the experience of it is so different. And this is what happens when we simply repeat that ridiculous, excuse me for joking, phrase. This training is much more powerful than it initially appears. You may think nothing's happening, but I don't think that. I know better. It's really quite amazing. What is happening, when we repeat that phrase, when we incline away from dosa over and over again, is quite literally neural networks are being formed. A habit is being formed. And through this repetitive training, what manifests as a result of this repetitive training is these wonderful surprises. I was just in Holland last month doing a very short Metta city retreat. It was just a weekend from like 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. It wasn't a lot of practice. The second day of the retreat, we had a little bit of sharing at the beginning of the day. And somebody related what had happened to them going home the night before, the evening before. They were riding their bicycle, going home, and suddenly, somebody came right in front of them. And what they experienced was this huge surprise because there was no anger. They had been repeating the phrase, may whatever beings be safe and protected, and that's what came out. So the more we encourage these metta pathways, the more these little surprises can arise. And those old habits of dosa, those old stories that may be repetitive, they lose their stickiness and their pull. They may continue to arise because conditioning is conditioning and it doesn't go away. But we don't pick them up. We don't get hooked. And this is the second aspect that I wanted to talk about tonight very briefly, and that's not training, but purification. Because as we undertake the training, the mind naturally becomes purified. The heart naturally becomes purified. Because metta is that relational practice, and because we start, as I said, where it's easy, what emerges, as I've said, is everything that isn't metta, but in quite a specific way. Each category purifies something specific. So we are grounded in metta in the category we use today. There's not a lot of purification that happens with this. The category tomorrow is the dear friend. And that's where this near enemy, this sentimental attachment begins to emerge and be purified. And then we get a little harder and we go to the neither loved nor hated person, kind of a stranger. And that's where this aspect of moha, of delusion, of not being able to connect becomes purified. Then we go even deeper into the difficult person. And that's, of course, where dosa really comes to the surface quite strongly. And along the way, we see our habits, our tendencies, stories from the past, relational barriers, all this stuff comes up in that sequential way. When we do laundry in Myanmar, it's in a bucket. You put your clothes in the bucket, you put water in the bucket, you put detergent in there, and you let it soak. And sometimes you come back and there's this layer on the surface of, ooh, I didn't know my clothes were that dirty. The grit and the grime, the dirt comes to the surface. So it's like that with this practice. All that stuff comes to the surface. It's unavoidable and it's actually good practice. So I beg you, please do not assess your practice based on what you are feeling or experiencing. That has nothing to do with it. So we undertake this training and purification begins to happen. Both of these together, the training and the purification, really gradually over time gives us more and more trust and confidence in the process. We see the gradual development of this new habit of metta. We see more and more how we have the capacity to just let it all be there and we don't have to get involved. I think of it almost as a magical practice because it's so powerful and so in the moment as we practice, so hard to see. So I'm going to leave you with a verse from the Dhammapada that many of you know by now, I'm sure, but I love it. I really love it. It expresses the importance of this. The Buddha said, cultivate the wholesome, refrain from the unwholesome, and purify the mind. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. All the Buddhas, meaning not just him, not just our Buddha Gautama, but all the past Buddhas, all the future Buddhas. This is the essence of their teachings. That taking this up and putting that down. It's really powerful. So thank you for doing your heart laundry today, but guaranteed results. So let's just sit quietly and let the words settle.